All right. Hello, everybody. Sorry about the delay in starting. Rebooting my machine fixed the problem. So always reboot your machine before you go live is my, I got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did because when we've had people have reported some weird desync between audio and video on the recorded version, which is almost impossible for me to fix because it's your computer lagging and then catching up and then lagging and catching up, and I'm too lazy to go through and like adjust the timings of every minute.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and I'm not sure how much the gain is.
Yeah, yeah. So if you've noticed any weird desync in the video, well, now you know why.
It's all my fault.
Yeah, I mean,
Totally.
I think as a general rule, I'm happy with that as an explanation. So, so how'd your talk go? You talked at Philly XP. You gave your TED talk.
Yeah. It wasn't.
Talk, but
I realized like an hour is not a lot of time.
It's really not. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this, but when I've got a topic I'm excited about, I could talk for hours and hours.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody actually wants to hear me talk for hours and hours, but I could go on.
Yeah.
So you ran out of time.
Yeah. So well, I didn't run out of time. When I was practicing, I was like, oh, I wanted to say a little bit more about the stuff we've been doing. And I wanted to go, and I was realized like, I can't, in order to get to the end, in order to feel like I covered all the aspects, I did mention nullables and sort of organize things into some one of the things I wanted to talk about in that talk, and I think it got across is like, why are we doing what we're doing? We're doing it so the code is easier to test. And like, what are the things that make it hard? And one of the things that makes it hard is I/O. And so how do we keep that separated? And so that was sort of the main gist. But yeah, I think it went well. I heard lots of comments, and they were all good.
Good.
So
yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Philly XP has historically put their videos up online. So
yeah, it actually already is up online. I just haven't tweeted about it because I want to put a page and add some commentary and links to it.
But send me the link when you get a chance.
I will do that.
Take a look.
Yeah. And you had a talk on FAST?
Yeah, that was a couple of weeks ago. Unfortunately, the microphone was having issues, and although the recording is up online, I'm not advertising it because it's got really weird audio. So that was unfortunate. But I've given talks about FAST before. Yeah. The big news for me last week, though, was that the final version of the Nullables article.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, I created this whole Nullables Hub, which is sort of a place where you can go, you can send people that's sort of got it indexes all the different stuff. It's got a link to this live stream. It's got a link to my Lunch and Learn series. It's got the examples, and it's got the big article. And that's all at jamesshore.com/s/nullables, which used to point to the article, but now points to this hub, which I think is a good starting point.
That's great.
So yeah, that's a big deal. And I've also been working on TypeScript versions of the examples.
I saw.
Yeah. I really like TypeScript. This is the first time I've worked on it on my own. I've worked with other people who've been using TypeScript, but this is the first time I've really dived in to try to understand it. Because my training course, which is happening in April, the Nullables training course, is going to give people the opportunity to work in JavaScript or TypeScript. So I'm not only figuring out, everything I need to figure out for TypeScript, but also how can I maintain a single code base with two different languages.
Right.
And the way I'm doing it is I've made a branch that's extended off the main JavaScript branch. Schmanzi. Yeah. And I've just modified that one to be TypeScript. And what I found is that as I make changes, I can rebase that on top of my changes. And that's mostly working. I mean, whether it continue to work, I don't know.
Right.
I have to get into the more complicated example, but have you looked at TypeScript at all?
I've used TypeScript on and off when I was doing my online version of my TDD game. I was using Vue for the front end, and that's all. Doesn't have to be TypeScript, but it's sort of, you pretty much want to use TypeScript. I like it. I mean, I honestly, I'm a statically type. I'm a type guy. Like I like types, and so I really like it. How it's. I mean, it's not quite what what I get in Java, but it's to me much more fits my brain better than JavaScript does, and hopefully the refactoring capabilities will catch up. I haven't actually done much with TypeScript in depth in like a year or so.
It's changing pretty rapidly.
Yeah, it looks like I've seen like, oh my gosh, like they're adding so much. Yeah. Hey, Squeegee.
Hey, Squeegee. I have to say that as a type system, I feel like it's much more sophisticated than what you get in Java and C Sharp, or at least C Sharp tends to evolve a lot quicker than Java does. Yeah. So even though I tend to work more in C Sharp these days than in Java, but I feel like I'm actually able to keep up with what Java's doing more easily than C Sharp because it doesn't change that quickly. Yeah,
they're much more methodical and willing to. I mean, it's a little frustrating because like stuff is in preview and then third preview and then final two preview and but they usually, I mean, they care a lot about backwards compatibility, and when they finally do get it out, it's solid. But yeah, you don't, like Squeegee says about like unions and stuff like that. It's like it's really awkward in Java.
Well, and the type inference and the duck typing is fantastic. Yeah. Like I can, like for example, I implemented an embedded stub, and doing that in TypeScript was, you recall we had to make an interface and then inherit it. Yeah. I just said, here's an interface, and I made the stub and I said that implements the interface, and then I just passed in the real thing, and it was like, yep, that's the same interface. I didn't have to redefine it or anything. It's just like, okay, yeah, there you go. And that was really nice.
Yeah.
I have to admit, the jury is still out for me because the TypeScript compiler is slow.
I was gonna mention, like, for that fast turnaround. Yeah.
Now, I have not really dug into like the incremental compilation stuff because my the toy example that I started with, it's only 10 files, right? So it takes about half a second for it to compile,
right? And
some of that is JavaScript starting up, but I'm worried that when I get to the actual like more sophisticated, complicated example, or if I were to try to use it in my real code, it would be a problem. There is a tool called ESBuild, I think, that will compile TypeScript for you, but it doesn't do any of the type checking. So it's just doing stripping the type annotations, which is not. It's not that useful. Yeah. And there's a little bit of like TypeScript is a little bit ahead of proper JavaScript, but not it's not that different if you turn on the right options.
Right.
So yeah, and what I get, if the refactoring is not there, I don't think it's worth it, because I get all the benefits from TypeScript of just by doing runtime type checking.
Right.
Having good tests and runtime type checking will basically turn a dynamically typed language into the benefits of the statically typed language, because the test will run, the runtime type check will fail, and you'll get a report in the test. And you don't have to write tests for the types. You just have your normal tests, and the types get checked by coincidence.
Yeah.
And that's a lot faster than running the TypeScript compiler.
Yeah, that's why I haven't checked out much in the way of when I was playing with TypeScript. It didn't seem to offer much more in the way of refactorings. I'm like,
that's down to the tooling. Like maybe IntelliJ is caught up on that. I haven't really tried it yet.
I haven't looked. So. Hey, Pixie report.
I have noticed that IntelliJ is much smarter. Like it sees the type inference, and it will tell you, like, if you hover, it'll say this is this type, and that's got some benefits. Yeah. But man, that fast feedback, that turnaround is king. And I've got such a nice build system in my real production code that I'm getting turnaround in like a third of a second,
right?
In a lot of cases, and a half second or a couple of seconds from a TypeScript compiler. Like
It's amazing
it
how
used to be I
like
would kill to have a 2-second turnaround, but
exactly.
now it's
Yeah.
like, oh, come on,
Yeah.
just go a little faster.
Yeah.
So, should we get to work on our database stuff?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
Switch over to
So, as I recall, for those of you just joining us, the let me actually answer what squeegee says first. Wallaby, I've heard about. I've not used it myself, but I believe it's a continuous test engine for JavaScript. Is that right, squeegee? Have you heard about that? Have you heard about this, Ted?
I've worked with somebody who used it. I didn't quite get what it was doing because I'm not sure how much he understood what he was doing.
It's one of those. I don't know if I'm not up on the state of tooling in Java, but it's a continuous test runner. So when you save a file, it will run it immediately.
Yeah, there used to be a tool
looked at it,
called Infinitest, a plugin for IntelliJ that would, every time a file change, it would recompile and rerun the tests. Unfortunately, it has not been updated in a few years.
Yeah, that's basically the script I've written myself. Is a little dependency analyzer that will run the tests associated with whichever file I've changed. And yeah, they're a game changer. The Wallaby folks reached out to me when they were first developing it, and I was doing my Let's Code JavaScript stream, and they wanted me to use it on stream. But unfortunately, it didn't fit what I was doing. I was using Karma, which is a DOM-based test runner, and it didn't work with Karma at the time, so I couldn't use it. And I developed my own little command line tool, and that's been good enough for me. So I haven't looked back. But I would definitely look at it if I were starting from scratch today.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of your tooling, someone posted how to execute something as part of JUnit when it completes and get the status and get the outcome status. And so I implemented that and hooked it up with sound effects like you have for your thing.
Oh, cool.
So I might try that next week. And basically it runs, I have a script that runs in the background, watches for file changes, then uses the Maven daemon. So basically it's actually the startup is faster because it just runs in the background and keeps the JVM running.
Nice.
And so I meant to have that ready for today, but just ran out of time. So
that's cool.
We'll see how that works next time.
I spent a ridiculous amount of time trolling the royalty-free archives for sounds when I put that together. So if you want to just grab the sounds that I've got out of the repo, they are royalty-free.
I unfortunately made the same mistake, and I'm like an hour later. And then I realized, wait a second, Java has built-in MIDI and synthesizer. So I was like, why am I pulling in a WAV file? Let me just play a couple of things. And so, of course...
Then you went down that rabbit
hole. But dug my way out. Can you dig your way out? Anyway, filled in the hole and got out. And it's like, okay, I'm happy with this. And
nice.
It was one of those, a lot of times, and this is sort of a separate thing, but like, there's just a certain amount of just fun of like, the side project doesn't have to be anything other than, oh, this is really cool. And then just play with it and true it. Pixie, does it read mod files? It does. I'm not sure what the standard is, but it does. You can go look up Java and sequencer and MIDI and find the details of that. I am no expert in it, but you can certainly. But I know it does have some MIDI file support.
Yeah, mod files are different. That's the Amiga standard, and then was expanded by the demo scene.
Yeah. With
Scream Tracker. That's waveform samples that are pitch bended.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's not the same as MIDI.
Yeah, because MIDI has all the. Anyway, there's a whole.
Yeah. That I was really into the demo scene. I never actually programmed anything for the demo scene, but I loved like watching the demos, and seeing and listening to mod files. Yeah. But I got what you were saying about automatically hooking into Maven. That I think there's really two keys. The sounds are actually enormously effective if you've got a fast build. Like if your build is less than a second, being able to hit save and not even have to look, just get that instant feedback is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is getting rid of that JVM startup time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I used to be in my JavaScript build, I actually ran it all in a single process, and rather than spawning out to say Mocha or the linter, I would actually dig into the command line source code, figure out what libraries it was calling under the covers, and run those libraries directly, which was incredibly masochistic of me. But it was fast, right? But with the new version of with ES6 modules, you can no longer clear the module cache like you used to be able to. So now I have to respawn a new process. But the next optimization I'm going to make is I'm going to, as soon as the build finishes, I will spawn a new process and just have it sitting there waiting. Right. Which is effectively what you're talking about doing with I mean, I will do anything to get sub-second build times. Including selling my firstborn. Don't tell him that. Luckily, my kids don't watch my stream. But anyway, I got a kid for sale. If anybody
for the right
knows
price.
how to make it build faster.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So last time we finished up the corruption checking cases for our database, and so we have this list. And we have we have this list of things we were gonna work on next.
Let me write that down. So database update, die checks, refactor, compare contrast, remove, and nullability. There's one other thing that I was thinking about over the course of the past week, which is that we talked about we were checking for error conditions, but there were some sort of fundamental database errors that we're not checking for, like can't connect and invalid credentials, and no write access, and just sort of fundamental stuff. And I don't know if we can test that without making our lives really miserable. But what I would like to do is to have some code in here that I want to be able to handle that. And again, this sort of comes down to, do we really want to do this on stream, or is this something that I would do in a real production project but wouldn't do here? What are your thoughts?
I don't, so like not having the right credentials or the connection not being available or the database just not being up.
And again, I don't necessarily want to write tests for this, but there is a whole, like, Hibernate is going to throw errors at us when things aren't working. And we need to be able to handle those. And I want to know what they are, as effectively.
And so what I don't know offhand is when those errors are sort of basically when those exceptions are thrown.
Startup?
There's some stuff that it does at startup that may be just too early. That's not something we can catch as we execute something, but I think it happens much earlier on in that startup process when it's allocating the connection pool and all sorts of bootstrapping stuff. So I think a lot of that happens at startup.
Well, but there's definitely stuff that has to happen at runtime too, because if the network is interrupted, for example.
Yes, absolutely. If everything started up fine and you get an interruption or a disconnect or somehow permissions changed while the app was up, which perhaps has been known to happen. I don't know how worth it is.
Well, if this was a real production project, I would figure out what those things were, and then I would actually convert them to a checked exception and force the caller to address them, because they do need to be addressed. And it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, would I address them? So all my production code especially if it runs on the web, has a top level error handler.
Right.
And it, anything that is really non-recoverable just filters up to the top level error handler. It returns a 500 to the user, and it puts the details in the log. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's only a problem if you start 500ing on things that are legitimate issues that come up that need to be addressed, like, for example, this game corruption.
Right.
But the database going down, yeah, I'm just going to get an alert. I'm going to be woken up, and it's going to be like,
yeah,
your hair should be on fire now.
Right.
Here's your blowtorch.
Right.
Go forth and do what people with their hair on fire do. So I guess what I would do is I would spend a little time thinking about, well, which of these things are just the whole system is down, go fix it, versus I can present an error to the user and fail gracefully, like degrade and to go into a degraded mode rather than the whole site is down.
Right.
And I would definitely be looking at Spring JPA and saying, well, what exceptions can this throw, and making a decision for each of those. But again, I don't know if that's worth doing on stream, but I think it's worth at least sort of thinking about.
Yeah, I would say it's probably not a good use for stream time, but it's certainly something could look into for next time, and I can sort of report back a bit.
Yeah. So, but yeah, for those of you watching, if you're working in production, you do need to be thinking about these things. And I think one of the sort of classic failings of frameworks is they try to make everything neat and tidy when the world is not. And one of the ways the world is not tidy is that networks are not instant, and networks partition, and networks get confused, and databases exist on networks. So,
and on file systems, which also have their own, although probably less often than network problems. But
so one of the really interesting things, that used to be that file systems would just fail, right? But SSDs don't. Well, they can outright fail, but they also fail in a new way, which is that they become read-only. And that's an entirely different failure mode than you would see from spinning Rust, which would just start seeing bytes disappear, or the whole system would not work anymore. So yeah, and it's in a real production environment with any amount of load, you will run into it eventually.
Yeah, and sometimes it even has, especially as it gets towards its end of life, can start slowing down in strange ways.
Yeah,
there's all sorts of edge case stuff that, like you said, is like you've got enough traffic and you're running it long enough, it will happen.
Well, and one of the classics that everybody has, I shouldn't say everybody, that used to be a really common thing people would run into, is that it's less of an issue now with cloud-based systems and computers being torn down and set up more frequently. But the temp files would fill up the disk without anybody realizing it. Or you'd run out of file handles, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting failure in that, I guess it is sort of read-only, in that you try to write something and you get an out of space exception.
Right.
And people, of course, would not program their software to handle this.
No.
And it would fail in really bad ways. So that's why I think it's important to think about this. But I agree, it's probably not the best use of our time today. Do you want to start out by just writing a test that proves that we can update? We sort of jumped ahead to all this sort of edge case stuff, but actually being able to update would probably be good.
I like updating. So let's see, that's writes, load. Probably.
I think I kind of want to put it after load. It will updates a previously loaded game or something like that.
Yeah. See, this is where I would be splitting the test file into. Here's regular stuff, and here's like error condition stuff.
Yeah. And if I was using something like Mocha, this is where I'd be introducing describes. I'd have a describe block for save, I'd have a describe block for load, and I'd have a describe block for error for edge cases. But I really like being able to share the helper methods, and I feel like splitting the file starts to get really messy compared to just having like regions in C# or describe blocks or simple comments with lines between them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay keeping. I mean, I'll I'll live with it in one file, because I agree. It's nice to have some of the helper stuff just in here, like the save the game options and things like that.
And once you start having to factor the shared helper stuff out, it gets messy. It's not so bad the way you've got your directory structured, where it's effectively one directory per file per related files.
Yeah.
But still.
Squeegee says try nested classes. I've tried them. I don't care for them. In terms for tests. Otherwise, I'm fine with them. So actually, I'm going to do. Something like that. Okay. So we wanted a test that says update works with possibly a better name.
Update. Well, saving previously loaded game updates. Yeah. How about saves previously loaded game?
All right.
So I'm thinking here we just need to run save game. No, we need to create a new.
So we need to save a game with something, load it, and then modify it. Sorry, save. What am I? Yeah. What?
Let me. I think I got it. Let me try typing some stuff here. So yeah, I'm thinking what we want to do here is I want to create a game like this. I want to load the game like that. I want to modify the snapshot. Can I do this?
That's a good question. Should you be able to do that is really the question.
Why am I getting an error on load game?
Because it throws an exception, so we can just do throws exception there. Yeah.
Okay.
You can't, because snapshot is a read-only record. And so what we can do is create another snapshot. I mean, if we want to make this realistic, we would convert it into a game.
I don't want it to be realistic. I want it to just be at our level.
Okay. So then what we do is just create another snapshot from the other snapshot. Yeah, so let me try something. So I think we can do
If we're making a new snapshot, do we even need to load the game?
Technically, we don't. Yeah, we actually don't need to modify. Yeah, you're right. If we're just creating the existing snapshot, then I mean we can just not bother loading and just create a new one.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to modify our test name then to say update existing game.
Yeah. Can we put the word save up front? Yeah. Well, if JPA, Squeegee, if JPA wants us to load the entity, that's the responsibility of the database implementation. So I think that's something that we'll actually find out whether we need to do.
Yeah, let's see what happens. I guess that's why we're testing this.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't need to load. And so what we want to do is this snapshot. So roles, it's 3, true, oops, true, and dice, and the scoreboard. There is no scoreboards. What have we been passing in for? No scoreboard.
I think we should just do an empty scoreboard.
Yeah, so what is an empty scoreboard? It's basically
just a new scoreboard.
It's a new scoreboard snapshot with an empty map. There we go. And we want to save it. So
that should
just
work. We should be able to use our existing.
So we're saving the snapshot. So that's just. So that one goes.
Oh, you know what?
Oh.
We can just use our existing abstraction.
Right. Right, with the save game options, because that's the save game. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is actually save game. I forgot how we use this.
It's parenthesis. I got it.
It's game. Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's just that. Yeah, that.
See, now this is where the point where I wish we had broken this out. Instead of having it be game, we had each of the individual pieces, because we don't actually care about anything except for the hand of dice here.
Well, it does need to be. Don't we want to have it be the same?
My assumption is that what we would do next is, let me.
Yes, squeegee, I did. I created. There's a postfix plugin that made that trivial.
I assumed that we would do something like this. We'd select, what is it, hand of dice? Current hand. From games.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Where ID equals, what is it? Game database dot game ID.
The only game ID. And we imported that, so we don't need game database.
Yeah. And that's going to be a list of string. Actually, we could probably just do a comparison against game rows. Assert that game rows contains exactly. I'll let you type that in. I'm not sure what the best syntax is there.
Let's finish that. So that is a list of string. And that contains exactly. This should be the only game ID.
Execute query just returns an untyped list because it could be anything coming back.
What did we? Oh, we just returned a list. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Actually, that's all it contains, right? Just one row.
And it's only going to give us, it's just going to be 55555. It's not going to be anything else.
Could do that. Helps with this. And so then we expect this. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So actually, we're just selecting the current hand.
Yeah.
We're not selecting anything else. Actually, I don't even know what the return type is.
Yeah, I think we just need to run it and see.
Yeah. So okay, let's see what happens. Because hibernate might be too smart and make that not an array.
Failed to load application context.
Oh, oh, because I rebooted, I think the database is not running. Let's connect.
Hey, now we know what happens when the database isn't running.
Yeah.
Nothing good.
Actually, it's Docker that's not running. Docker's not running? Docker is not running. Docker's still starting. Okay. Okay. Let's try that again.
Hey, end of functor.
End of functor.
We could do that sort of feature testing, but the problem with that is that's slow. And what we're doing here is we're specifically testing our wrapper. So that's giving us the ability to do a lot of very detailed tests that I wouldn't want to do from a higher level, because then you get a combinatorial explosion of lots of nitty-gritty tests that are hard to read. I think it's just 5.5. I think it's just the single string here.
Yeah.
Remember,
yeah.
Remember that Hibernate
is trying to be smart.
It does completely ridiculous things where if you're only selecting one value, it doesn't give you a list of objects, arrays.
Yeah, so this is really list of string. We could say list of object. Be clear.
I think this is a case. I know you love having your types specified, but I think this is a case where saying we don't care what the type is because we're just comparing to something is appropriate.
So that seemed to work.
Okay, good. So select does work. Let's go ahead and check in and just say that we did that.
Yeah, I don't like squeegee. I don't like inlining variables unless the thing you're inlining is pretty short. So
Yeah, I would probably inline it if it was me, but I go with a wider screen than you
Yeah.
do, Ted. Um, so I tend to be more vertically compact than you, but more horizontally stretched.
Yeah, yeah, we could
Um,
extract it. It's less about the width and it's more about it. I find that it makes the assertion statements a bit harder to read for me. So I like naming the thing and then asserting that, but that's just my style. I generally don't use var, but in this case, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. So I think we've got all of our test cases done. What I would like to do now is, and this is part of why I like having it all in one file, because I'll tend to write test, TDD, TDD. I'll do some refactoring as I'm going. But then at the end, I want to look at the whole test file and really like go through it with a fine tooth comb. And I'll typically just do that from the top down and say, is this reading clearly? And particularly want to start factoring out the helper methods if I haven't done it up until now.
Right.
So let's go ahead and can I do some stuff here?
Go for it.
Okay. So you might have to follow behind me and clean up my mess, but I think I want to start out by saying save game always writes to the same ID because we only support one game. And I kind of want to change this. I realized afterwards that I think I prefer it to be more like this. Let's see, I'll try to follow your conventions here.
Did go together die? Oh, no, there it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing I'm used to not having IDE support because I basically don't here. So that should still work, right?
Probably the type changed. What does it think it is? Oh. That's...
Oh, what is that complaining about? That's a different type?
So when it converted this only game ID to what? To a string or an object? It's different. This is where I think that the types would be useful. Because again, this is returning just an untyped list, and I'm not sure what it is underneath. Probably object.
Can we just do that?
Well, it is a long. I'm not sure why. And this is probably just an assert J converting stuff to string.
Okay, so then this would be a list of what? Long?
Uppercase long. Because then it will compare them as long against long, as opposed to, I think it's... Yeah, I think it's coming back as ints for some reason. I'm not sure why that would be. Oh, you actually don't need this.
Oh, I got that wrong.
Is that still wrong? What is it?
Okay, I was not expecting to run into a roadblock right away. All right, how do we fix this? Do we just go back to the way it was before?
So what did we have? So select ID from games should be returning a list of...
JPA actually returns an int. Let's just do that.
Yeah, so if we're gonna do that, then we have to drop. Yeah. Why would it be returning? I don't understand why it would be returning an int. It's most definitely a long.
I think, why is this giving me an error here? Oh, because I can't.
You can't do just a cast, so you'd have to do a long dot value of. Sorry, an integer. You'd have to. So let's first do this. Let's just do that and see what happens.
Okay. That's a good point. Still doesn't work. Is it returning a string to us?
So let's do list of, but it's probably not casting that. So let's go back to this, but let's do because I don't think it's returning a string. I think it's returning some kind of object. So let's do this. Let's get the 0th. Yeah, so it's seeing it as an object. And what we actually want to do, and I'll get rid of this get 0 in a second. So we want to assert that is equal to. I think we'd have to cast
Xproof,
it.
We had a nice long conversation about this last week, and I said that I would prefer to copy the constant into the test rather than making it public, and Ted said he would prefer to make it public.
How do we? Oh, it's just a cast in this case.
You got to be kidding me.
Oh, because it's a big integer underneath. That's why it looked weird.
Oh, it's not a long.
It's not a long. It's a big integer. Okay. And this is
okay.
So if we say list big integer, was that what we had before? No, we just had objects. So then we should be able to do IDs contains exactly, and now it knows it's big integers, and so now we should be able to do this. Value of. Here we go.
Okay. So should we change the only game ID to be a big integer?
Well,
that'd mean changing the game table to have a big integer ID rather than a long ID, right?
Yeah, I mean, because we're executing a query, a native query, we lose the type information. That's why it's returning a big integer, because it's just looking at the schema and saying, oh, right. In the schema, it's defined as a big integer. I will give you the representation of that. Honestly, what I would do is create a smarter assertion. So what I would do is basically execute query would return something smarter than just a list of some sort. Right. And then the assertion would be against that object to say, assert that it has this ID or assert that it has these things. And so
I think if we were doing more SQL stuff, I would want to do that. But I think this is good enough.
Yeah. And this is something I actually want to demonstrate. And so I'll do that separately to sort of raise a level of abstraction by, especially for this kind of thing. It's not worth it now, but I think it's an interesting contrast. Yeah. Okay, so that works.
So that was our first refactoring. I'm going to continue on with our second one, which will only take twice as long. Actually, we should probably take our first break.
Sure, let's take a break now.
All right, so we'll be back in a moment, folks.
All right, we're back.
Okay. So yeah, what I wanted to do next was just make this a little bit ergonomic by introducing an overload. So down here, what did I do wrong?
Save game doesn't return anything.
I think it's doing a round trip to your computer to do my type checking and everything. Because it takes a long time for the squigglies to appear and disappear.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, that's fine.
So, and then here we've got the execute query. I think that's good. I might want to modify the save game option so that we can split out each type. Makes them a little bit easier to read and also allows them to specify them separately. But let's look at the other ones first. Got the scoreboard. I think I want it to be, right. So save game, writes, and save game, writes. That looks good. Okay, so here's where we get to our loading. So we've got this one, which I'm going to bring up to here. Feel free to stop me at any point. I think that's a pretty good flow. Here's where I want to have that multiple types. So I think I'm going to go ahead and introduce that. If that's right with you?
Not multiple types.
Sorry, multiple types isn't very clear. Multiple options. So basically, roles, int roles would be this dot roles equals roles, return this. And that would be save game options.
Oops.
And then here we can just say, that's probably not worth it. I think I'm just going to brute force it. I was thinking about a fancy way of factoring it out or something like that.
I was thinking like round is completed or round not completed. Is that what you were thinking? Two separate Boolean methods.
Yeah, I think I'm. Are we going to have a problem with these names conflicting with each other?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that should still work the same because I haven't used any of the new stuff yet.
Did you want to? They're fine.
Were you thinking about here? What were you going to get at?
I was going to get at dropping the hand of dice of.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky one because the more we abstract, the more we make it hard to understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's why I hesitated.
Yeah, I think not in this case. Although it's really tempting. Like, probably depending on what day you catch me, I'll have a different answer on that one. Okay, is that working?
Yes.
Okay, so scoreboard is working the same. Now here, we can just say hand of dice.
So it's current hand, not hand of dice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're sharing your screen because from my perspective, I hit run and nothing happens.
Oh yeah, because it's running it remotely on me. Yeah.
Okay, so now we should be able to get rid of this. Did I see anything using it?
Nope, all looks good.
Okay.
Yep, that all worked.
All right. So that was kind of a brute force approach to that. There's probably a cleverer way of doing it, but
yeah, you could do it through some refactorings, but it's not. It wouldn't do much more other than make some of the creation of the methods easier.
Yeah. I can get a real long way with creative use of find and replace and cut and paste.
Yeah.
And then if I could get the Control G option that you have shown in the past to work, then I'd be rocking.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's save game. Load game. So I think what I want to do is I want to factor out this code.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to let you do that because you've got the refactoring support on your end that I don't have.
So we want to extract a method.
I don't remember, what do we call the other one? Called the other one execute query. So let's say execute statement or just execute.
Do we want to make
SQL?
this one specific to an insert?
No, I think it's...
So you want the whole SQL. So execute SQL?
Yeah. What do we call it? It's called execute update. Let's just say execute update.
Oh, okay. No, we'll do that later. Just... That work right? Yep, that worked.
And of course, we'll factor out that SQL string and let JavaScript or Java do its magic. Or rather, not Java, IntelliJ.
Oops. You know what? That's voila.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay, so
squeegee mentions execute command. I think I like sort of keeping it with what the underlying thing is called, execute update. So I'm fine with that.
I will definitely move away from that, but I think it's such a thin wrapper around it that it makes sense to do that.
That we can inline.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move that down next to our execute query. And what do we have next? So that's load chord game state. Now we're going to say load game.get because it returns an optional. Assert that the loaded game is equal to that. I think that's good. Cute. Yeah, that seems pretty clean. Yeah. And then, do you have a preference in terms of style versus these two styles?
Just consistency.
Okay. I usually call these edge cases rather than error cases.
Okay.
Because there's some edge cases that are always errors, but they're sort of in the same category.
Right, right.
Okay. This didn't quite figure out. Can you inlay that for me?
Sure. You want to inline this? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That all works.
Okay. This looks good. This looks good. Looks good. I'm not really looking at them closely. I'm just sort of like glancing through them. I think what I'd like to do here is make a new assertion that says assert load game throws. Throws game corrupted.
I was just going to refactor that.
Or something like that.
Yep.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. It's definitely.
I'm going to let you do that.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And we could say load game throws. Actually, maybe we should say load game throws because
and then make the class.
And then make it a parameter. I mean, it's always the same parameter, but that just feels more like the right level of abstraction. Mostly because I don't like the name assert load game throws exception. Like if it was like assert game is corrupted, that would work for me. But then we'd put the load game in. I don't know. It just doesn't feel right.
So here I'm going to accept a signature change. And then call this as the parameter.
I kind of like having the class first.
Yeah, I was going to flip it around. Right.
Yeah, squeegee could do that, but that seems like a lot of work for relatively minor benefit.
Yeah, that like it's like, you know, are we basically just recreating the original thing, which is already by its nature very generic. I mean, in fact, this could be cleaned up a little bit by just replacing.
Yeah, that kind of makes me want to re-inline that game corrupted. Because you're right, we're not.
Let's try it. I mean, so what I always say is like if it's something straightforward. Let's take a look at it. It's like, if we don't like it, we can just inline it.
Yeah, the main thing is the name. I want it to be clear that it's throwing game corrupted.
Yeah. Oops. So do we want to add then game corrupted here to the name? Or do we want to say that?
Yeah, but kind of hate it. So I'm not sure. I usually wouldn't do assert that. I would just say assert load game throws or assert load game.
We don't have to use the same prefix. So we can say assert load game throws game
corrupted. Yeah, I think we're good.
I think it's fine. Let's drop this down to... Let's make sure we didn't break anything. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me. Other than I want to bring the save up to, we got save game here, save game there, assert load game throws, save and so save seems to me to be a higher level thing. So I would put that a little bit higher, but I guess we've got to associate with these save game options.
Yeah, it's like, how do you want to group? Do you want to group like things together or sort of level together?
Yeah, I think the way it's definitely want the levels together and I want like things together, and those are in conflict here.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I think this is good enough.
Yeah.
Let me just take one last look. Yeah, that's pretty. It's pretty. I like it. And that's basically what I'll do is I'll just look through it. I'll sort of critique it kind of with a fine-tooth comb at first, and then as I'm getting more through it, I'm like, yeah, and then I'm going to sort of skim, looking like, just sort of look, my eyes will glaze over and like, where does the code look similar?
Yeah, the squint test.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I'm good. Did you see anything else that I didn't mention?
I don't think I saw anything. Edge cases. Oh, I would want to put a separator here, though.
I was just thinking that, yeah, like a helpers or something like that. I'm going to make it consistent because I am just a little bit anal.
Did I miss a number of dashes? Yes. That's funny. That's always two. Yeah, looks good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and check that in. Clean up tests, refactor tests. Yep.
All right.
Okay. And then the other refactoring we had was over on the right in the production code. If you scroll down, we were going to fix up our HandOfDice parsing.
Right.
And I think there's an interesting design question here. And I'm wondering, I suspect you might handle it differently than I would, because we've got a little bit different philosophy on our value objects, but I think it's fundamentally compatible. You said that you would have that you like to put in preconditions, basically Eiffel style invariants on your value objects.
Yes.
And your code in general.
Yeah.
And I don't use invariants. I don't think about my code in terms of invariants. I know a lot of people really love to design that way, and I don't begrudge it, but it's just not the way I think about it. But what I do is I do put in a lot of fail fast code. So it's not so much an invariant, but just like, well, how do I expect this method to be called, and what could go wrong? Also, if I'm pulling something out of an array and there should always be at least one row, or a certain number of rows, I'll assert that I've got the right length, or the right range of lengths often. But for me, those fail fast checks are erasable. Like if I took them out of my production code, the code would be equally correct. And so in Java, I would only have them throw unchecked exceptions. I would only have them throw something like runtime exception or the equivalent. So I would never write code that depended on one of those exceptions happening. And what I'm getting at here is that right now on line 100, so I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit. If we factor out this from persisted hand into a HandOfDice object and say, here's your numbers, and then that throws an exception because the numbers are invalid, that means that game database has made a programming error.
Correct.
From my perspective.
Yes.
So we need game database to not do that in the first place. So what I would do is I would probably implement a static method or something on HandOfDice, like HandOfDice is valid roles or has valid roles, and I'd pass that in and have that return true or false, and do the throw on line 102 based on that check, rather than doing a try catch. Do you see what I'm getting at there?
I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also one of the forces that pushes me to wanting to have the string parsing happen in HandOfDice, because now, it's kind of the same thing. You'd still pass in the string and say and it would return either a HandOfDice or null maybe, or some, it would have some way of handling that. But I wouldn't want to use exceptions as my flow control mechanism for what is effectively logic without any external things that can go wrong.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
You wouldn't put the string parsing in HandOfDice. We've had that conversation.
I could be convinced to put the string parsing in HandOfDice. I probably wouldn't. But if I did, so to me, there's two types of checks that I do in objects. There's parameter validation. Did you give me valid stuff? Especially for value objects, I want to make sure that if you've asked for a value object and you then have it, that it's correct. And if not, it ensures that you never get an invalid. So I would never want a method that I want to make sure that the caller can't forget. So I'd put in the check for, does it have 5 elements and are they all integers and are they valid actually dice? Right. And I would do all that, and I would throw, if it didn't work, I would throw a runtime exception. And then from something like here, I would catch that and turn that into a game corrupted internal exception.
So I think the only difference is setting aside where the string parsing goes, because I think you made a pretty good argument for keeping the string parsing here when we talked about this a few episodes ago. And I'm on board with that. So we'll have this code do the splitting, but we still need HandOfDice to do the validation. And I think the only real difference here is that I really dislike using exceptions for flow control in this type of case. Either I'd want it to be a checked exception, which is kind of a hassle, or I'd want to just have a validation method. I would still call that validation method in HandOfDice and throw a runtime exception if it wasn't valid. But I wouldn't do a try catch here. Does that make sense?
Yep. So there are cases where, for invariance, I have what Vladimir Kurikov calls a can check, right? Can I roll the dice again? and it would turn yes or no, but then would still enforce that, well, you've already rolled enough times and you can't re-roll again. So boom, blows up because you shouldn't have done that in the first place.
Yeah.
Versus
basically
validation, where it's like, look, you got to know what you're doing. And if you don't know what you're doing, then I'm going to throw an exception. And
the thing is it's not possible for game database to know what it's doing.
Right.
Without us re-implementing all these checks.
Right. What I'm saying though is that it's to me it's a different kind of failure, and if I am going to throw, to me it's like how it's just how I think about it. I think of the validation as protecting the object, and I'm going to throw an exception, and I'm fine with relying on that and sort of naturally propagating exceptions, just because that's the way I do it in Java.
So I think we're on the same page in terms of the importance of value objects being protected, and I think actually we're on the same page about throwing an exception when that precondition is not met. The only difference appears to be what we think about in terms of how legit exceptions are.
Right. Yes. Yep.
So in my mind, and this isn't a JavaScript Java, I mean, this is something I've held for a long time, but actually was heavily influenced by my initial exposure to Java back in 1998 or so. In my mind, there are exceptions in logic indicate a programmer failure. Not, and so they should never be used for flow control. In fact, I don't think exceptions are great for flow control in terms of like what we're doing with game corruption either. And in more modern languages have better ways of handling that with algorithmic data types. But I'm okay using checked exceptions for that sort of flow control. And I will do that even in languages without checked exceptions. I'll say, yes, you're talking to the outside world. Something could go wrong. There is absolutely no way you can prevent that from happening. Try to catch an exception. But value objects are never dealing with the outside world. Value objects are always pure logic. And so in my mind, it's surprising and incorrect for them to do flow control with exceptions. And so what I want to do is just expose a method that we can call. And if we fail to call it, then yeah, we'll throw an exception, but then we fix it not by catching the exception, but by doing the validation. And your can do XXX is basically the same concept, except I would also apply it in this case. And I would even be fine naming it like can create HandOfDice, and then pass in the list.
Right.
And I think it's just one of those things that I feel like this is the right way of doing it, but I can't really justify it. Like if you're like, no, I really want to throw an exception here, I'd be fine with it. But for me, unchecked exceptions, runtime exceptions are fundamentally programmer errors. And using that as a flow control mechanism, because it's hidden, there's no way to see it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's the hidden aspect that I think is I agree is the unfortunate state of things in exception handling in Java.
Yeah. So a validation method or an optional or another, data type. I think these days, rather than doing a validation method, what I would probably do is I've seen a couple of patterns. One is to just return an algebraic data type, which is probably my preferred approach these days. And then the other option is to pass in a function to call that is called when the thing is invalid. And we can have that throw a game corrupted exception. I'd be fine with that. So let me toss down a couple of options here.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I learned that from Martin Feller's new edition of refactoring. I thought that was clever. I think he had it something along the lines of map.get, foo and default. But actually you can say map.get foo and default. which allows us to now say throw new game corrupted exception.
Right.
So if I were to just sort of break this down, we've got HandOfDice dot well, I'm not gonna go into all the syntactic detail.
Yeah.
But HandOfDice dot from list or something like that. HandOfDice dot from list. We've got HandOfDice dot is valid. And we've got try HandOfDice dot from list. Boo.
Right. And
catch runtime exception.
Yeah. So squeegee, the first one is very optional like, and then the question is how do we throw the exception? Is there information that the HandOfDice would want, basically diagnostic information that the HandOfDice might want to return?
I think we'd have to do something like this. Actually, no, we throw the game corrupted internal.
Yeah, we're throwing
and then
the internal from here. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we couldn't, it'd have to be an unchecked, have to be a runtime exception. And then the optional one that squeegee mentioned would be something like
Well,
how would that work?
Yeah, actually, you don't have to do that, and that's that's why the first option looks very much like what. So you basically
show me what that would look like.
Yeah. So what you do is you basically say bar equals HandOfDice from list foo, and then or else row, and then it'll be game corrupted internal exception. So basically it's who sort of at what level does it get thrown? Right? Does from list take something and then call it, or do we do it from out here?
So the only problem I have with that is really the name. In that option, I would rather it be called result and that returned an OK or an error rather than a something or a not or an empty. But in terms of the developer experience, I feel like line 97 is probably cleanest because it uses the majority of what's already existing.
Exactly. Yeah. It leverages the optional stuff. Because you can also then say, if we had a reasonable default, if there was such a thing in this case, which there isn't, then you could also provide that. Yeah.
The reason I don't love 97, and I think of all these options, I prefer 95 a little bit more. In the abstract, I think practically 97 is better. But the thing I don't love about 97 is that as a reader of this code, if I come along to HandOfDice.fromIt list and see that it returns optional, it's not immediately obvious to me that that's actually not. It didn't find it, but it was broken, right?
Yeah, I mean, this one, the 95, by having this as a parameter, makes it clear that you are required to do something
to handle it.
You're required to handle it. Here, I mean, people still aren't used to quite optional, and so they might not be familiar with that. Just doing a get is wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was saying 97 is more pragmatic, but I think 95 is actually a little better. It shouldn't be that hard to write. Um, but because of that pit of success, I think it does steer us in the right direction. And I definitely prefer it over like 99 or line 102. Either of those.
So basically, so looking at these options, I think I agree that those are actually better.
I just want to make them all visually the correct weight.
I mean, definitely. Yeah, I mean so the downside, the optional is it doesn't tell you what does it mean if it's empty. Like what does that mean?
Yeah, and it, because people are lazy, they're more likely to just do the .get and move on.
Exactly,
with their life.
Which is just wrong. But don't do that.
I am a big fan of writing my APIs such that it is impossible. Like nothing's impossible. There's always a greater fool, right? But to make them so that they are difficult to use incorrectly.
Yeah.
And actually line 95 is nice and compact. So I think the way you would probably write that, if I remember your preferred style, would be something like this. Is that right?
Yeah, and so then this one would be just like that.
Yeah. And would you put the foo here, or would you put it on the previous line?
Probably put it on the previous line, but if it was long enough, then I might. Yeah.
I find your style very weird, by the way. I haven't made any comments because, everybody has their own style, but my style when I'm doing multi-line is this, which you probably find equally weird.
Well, I basically do whatever IntelliJ does when it reformats.
I see. And I go through and obsessively tweak the settings to match the style I like.
Yeah. Because I want to make sure that anyone who's working on the code base can. One thing that drives me crazy, and it's a little that OCD, is like when there aren't spaces around commas and stuff is indented in ways that are just not like the rest of the code, and so I want to make it easy for people to just hit reformat, if not even done automatically upon check-in, and so. I may not always like how it's laid out, and there's times when you can override that in IntelliJ. You can sort of put annotations around it to tell IntelliJ don't reformat this section. But most of the time, I'm just like, this is fairly standard way of indenting, and it's what IntelliJ does. So I'll just
no, that's fair. I work with a lot of different companies, and when I do, I match their style, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I certainly agree but IntelliJ, or at least WebStorm, and I assume IntelliJ is similar, has an incredibly exhaustive list of options.
You can totally go nuts and make a unique unicorn of ways of formatting things. But because of the nature of the work that I do, which is a lot of teaching and training, I go for sort of the lowest common denominator in that area, where it's like, what's out of the box IntelliJ do? I'm going to mostly do that so that people aren't confused by, hey, how come my stuff looks different? Mm-hmm. So it's definitely context specific. And if I'm working with a company, then I'll abide by their style and use editor config and other customizations.
So I would say that teams have a consistent style, but I wouldn't say that companies have a consistent style.
Yeah, that's my experience as well.
And when teams don't have a consistent style, that's actually... it's a little bit of a yellow flag in that it tells me that the team's probably not really a team, but a bunch of one-person teams pretending to be a team.
Yep. Yeah, I always tell teams, it's like, I don't care what you standardize on, but you all have to standardize on something. And if you need help coming to agreement, then let's talk about that. But it's usually a flag of some sort, like the team is really not a team. Yeah, it's a bunch of individuals. which is far too often.
Okay, so so I think this is a pretty accurate summary of the options. I'm going to let you choose which one you go with.
I'd like to try the first one.
Yeah.
I haven't done it like that, but I actually like the cut of its jib.
Yeah, I do too. I'm glad we talked about it too, because 101 is what I was originally leaning towards.
Right.
But honestly, when I look at these two side by side, I kind of hate them both equally. So
I didn't want to say those kind of look the same.
Yeah,
it just depends on like how you feel about a catch versus an else. But yeah.
If I had to choose, I really dislike using exceptions for control flow and logic.
Yeah.
So if I had to choose, 108 would definitely be my last choice.
Right.
But I think they're actually in order of my preference, just coincidentally, the way they are right now. Like 95 is pretty cool. 98 is acceptable. And if we had an actual, the ability to make, if we had the ability to make our own types, then I might go with 98 and have, well, of course we have the ability to make our own types, but I might, if we had a standard error type built into the language as well as an optional, I'd probably go with that.
Yeah. I was actually looking at, there is a library, Vaver, which used to be called Java slang, that does have an either type. But again, it's like, if it requires a library, I unless like I'm in a team where they're using that library all over the place, I just stick with out of the box.
Exactly. I mean, something like Rust's result type, that really only works when it's part of the culture of the language, or at least the team.
Yeah.
And I really try to avoid creating cultural differences that are different from the language within a team, because those don't tend to stick.
Yeah.
And that results in weird lava flow, anti-pattern type stuff. So I think 95 is a good solution. So let's do that.
All right.
So I think we'll remember what that is. You want to just blow all these examples away and we'll start implementing it? So would you rather refactor what we have? Because that could get awkward. Or would you rather rebuild with new, let's see. I kind of want to refactor. We could refactor in place and then pull it out into HandOfDice.
Yeah, I would probably do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I was thinking, if we move it directly to HandOfDice, then getting access to the game corrupted internal exception is going to be awkward. But if we do it here and then get it into the right shape, we can move it to HandOfDice. All our tests will still work because they're sociable tests.
Right.
And then we can retarget our tests in the way you were talking about last time.
Yep. So let's do that like that. I'm just thinking what that second type is going to be. So let's see. Want to end up with foo is our, so this is our string.
That's HandOfDice.
But it's this string is what I'm saying.
Oh no, it's not actually. It's integers.
Oh, okay. So right, because we're doing actually this part. Okay.
Yeah. What we're doing is die value.
Right.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I try? Okay. So I think what we need to do is change this map to be a different map that's just well, it's just integer.parseInt. That will give us an array of integers. And then we can loop over that array. Basically, what I want to do is take the type checking that's happening here and move it down to here. Because right now we're type checking and mapping at the same time, which we need to get rid of.
Okay. So let's map to int. Let's just int. And then this. Oh, right. And this is collect. Why does it not like that?
So why are you using map to int instead of what you were using before?
Because for some reason I thought I wanted to use that and I actually don't.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to using parseInt with that where you're actually going to do some summarization or summing or aggregating or something like that. Yeah. Okay.
So is map to int basically a reduce? Is that what it's doing?
No, it converts it sort of to a primitive where you can do the math on it.
Rather than an integer object.
Yeah, so it's instead of a stream of integer objects, it's an int stream, which is more efficient.
Got it.
All right, and so then we wanted, I guess it doesn't matter when we check for if it's 5 or not. So pull that. Or I guess we'll it's not confusing. Then we can do, what do we want to do here? Here.
Well, now we need to basically, in JavaScript, I would do a for each over the list and call die value for each one. We could just do a for loop.
Should we just do a for each? So this is set up as a map.
No, it's a list at this point.
Right, but die value is set up to map die value to, in right now, nothing. So it's really just a validation.
Oh yeah. I think die value should no longer return die value.
Yeah.
Line 127 goes away. It's really just validate.
Yeah. Let's just call it. So then we can do integers for each. Oh, because it has this, we can't do that. Darn it.
You could just pass in a lambda, right? Or you could just inline it, honestly. I'd just say inline it and either do it in a for loop or as a lambda.
We'll do it as a for loop. Do it die. Just that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that should still pass. So why don't you run that and see where we're at? Yep. Okay. Now, the number format exception is our code. Everything from line 110 to 121 is the code we're going to move.
Mm-hmm. So we're already going to have a list of integers.
Yeah. No, that's correct. From list is what we want to call it, and it's going to return a hand of dice.
Yep. Yep. And then I think we want to take this. Which has a parameter?
No, that's not right. We need it to be a lambda.
Yeah.
Can we factor the throw new blah, blah, blah into a lambda? Is that one of the options that we have?
That's what, actually, yes, we can. So it's not extract method. It's, oops. Introduce functional parameter.
Nice.
We'll use supplier for now. That's weird that it's, I don't think that's, well, it looks right. The type is not what I would have wanted. I don't know why it typed the
Yeah, why does
HandOfDice.
it want the...
I don't know why it wants HandOfDice.
Yeah, that does make sense to me.
I think we can make callable. I'm not sure what we want to type that as. And then it's basically just... It's not a return. It's...
Oh, maybe that's why it was HandOfDice, because it was...
Oh, right. So let's... Yeah, thank you. Let's try that again. That's interesting.
No, we do want it to return a hand of dice. It's basically... yeah, we want a function that will return a hand of dice because this is what we're going to do if it fails. And of course, throwing will not return anything, but that's also fine. Yeah, squeegee got it. Supplier is probably right. And we can just name that default. Or if not default, then I mean, really, it's what we want to use when the value is invalid.
Invalid handler.
Yeah.
We'll start with that and refine it later.
Invalid result.
Hmm.
And then we want to call the same thing on line 124.
Right. Oops.
And
then HandOfDice is no longer passed in, so we can delete that. So this is what it's currently looking like.
Yeah. Yeah, this is good.
Do we like it?
Other than the duplication on 101, which sort of pushes me back towards thinking the string parsing belongs in HandOfDice again. But other than that, I do like it.
Yeah, it's interesting because these integers are integers as opposed, so we're doing this validation, which wouldn't have to be done if this was a list of die,
Right.
which was already constrained and a value object for a die value that was already in the range of 1 to 6.
Right.
Then it would just be, is the size right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think that's
That's
fine.
another refactoring we could do later.
Yeah.
Because once this is in HandOfDice, if we could choose to push down the validation down into die.
Right.
I think this is good. Let's, is it working? Did we pass our test?
Let's see. Hope so. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I think let's take our second break.
All right.
And then what we'll do is, you've already got a handofdice.from.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll just end up moving this code into handofdice.from and providing a default invalid result, which would be throwing a runtime exception.
Right. All right.
Break.
So let's take a break. We'll be back shortly. And we're back. Hey, Pellet.
All right. Hey, Pellet. What's your take on Pellet's question there?
So Pellet's asking about sort of the specificity of coding standards. Honestly, I like them to be encoded in IntelliJ's way of formatting things, where you hit reformat code and everybody says, yep, that's fine. And that means yes, there's going to be cases where it's like, at what point do we chop down and have things lined up underneath each other? So there's always going to be stuff that's not going to be specified, but I'm fine with like really. And I generally, if the team doesn't have a coding style, I'll say, let's start with the out of the box IntelliJ, because that's what we're probably using. And then we can modify it from there. And then set it up so that when you do a commit, IntelliJ does a reformat before it checks in.
Yeah. Go, so the Go community has Go format,
yes,
code FMT. And I've not used Go myself, but they universally rave about it. And I think it's because, so my take on it is basically the same as yours, except that I might be a little more extreme in that I will say coding styles bring nothing to the world except arguments. Like, I do not care what your coding standard is. And I actually don't care if you're consistent. What I care about is I don't want coding standard arguments, right? So anything I can do to prevent coding standard arguments from happening, that's what I want.
Yeah, and I agree. And usually the way I solve it is by, this is our coding standard. We're not going to talk about this anymore, because I agree. It is a pointless argument that just gets people like, deal with it. We've got bigger issues to fry and so on.
And that's why I didn't mention, like, we're in episode, 11, 10? 12. I don't remember. 12? Whatever, wherever we're at. We've been doing this for 12 3-hour sessions, and this is the first time I've said anything about your coding style, because it doesn't matter. And
I used to be the kind of guy who would get into long debates about why this one is better than this other. And now I'm just like, I don't care. Let's just agree that we will not discuss this anymore. And if that means I hand you your coding standard, then so be it. Or that, you go off and write something up and we agree that this, like, just let's agree and move on. Even if you disagree, it's all about, you can disagree all you want, but we're a team and this is not important.
It's not. Yeah, I mean, I certainly have a style that I prefer, and it's idiosyncratic, but I'll use it on my code. But I'm usually not in a position to dictate to teams I work with what their coding style should be. But I will tell them if that's a point of contention. I'll say you either need to agree to not care, or you need to agree to use a style. And if you can't agree, then we should just start with whatever the default is.
Yeah.
Most companies do have some sort of house style that they use, and then we just go with that.
And a lot of times, at least in the code bases I see, it's pretty close to what Google standardized on in the early 2000s. And there are some changes minor here and there, but
I've not heard a coding style argument in a while. Um, but maybe that's because I've just gotten lucky. The one thing that really, really bothers me is the K and R C style. I think that's the one. The one where they put every brace on its own line and they indent them halfway.
Oh, that's just horrible.
Yeah.
But you know, and this is the thing. It's like I would, you know, I actually hated the idea of the opening curly brace on a new line, and then I looked at some code and it's like, oh, actually that's kind of nice. But you know what? That's just not how 99% of the Java code is styled. Deal with it. And in the cases where, like, you know, an auto reformat doesn't touch it, and you like, again, it's like you said, it's like, can we just not? This is not important. It's just people get wrapped up around it, and I think letting go of being right is a deeper issue that needs to be worked on, and I continually work on it on myself because it's really hard.
It is really hard, and I think it's sort of, I mean, I have the same problem. I love being right, especially if it means other people are wrong, because there's certain, you know, there's certain pleasure in being right. But yeah. Well, we've got 50 minutes left. Let's get this factored over. I would love if we could make this game database nullable as well. And I don't think it'll take us very long, although I always say that and I'm always wrong. But if we can get this factored over, I think we are good to go.
So
have we checked this in yet?
We have not done a commit just yet.
I don't know that we need to. Squeegee, I think code style arguments are used by people to escape talking about the real problems, to be honest.
So let's make that static. Take it, move it over to our HandOfDice.
Yeah.
And then we will then, in HandOfDice, did I put it at the bottom? Where did I put it? I'll put it right here. Set that up.
I think if you have from, well, let's rename this to from.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And then this can just return.
Not yet. That needs to be copied down to line 38.
Yeah. It's going the wrong way. Oh, let's change the integer to die rolls.
Yeah. Maybe with 2 L's.
Oh, that would help if I use the right roll. The kind you eat, not the kind you have. Okay. All right. Did I break anything? Okay, that's cool.
And this, by the way, is one of the reasons I love sociable tests, because we've made a fairly substantial refactoring. We've changed where things are happening, and not only we didn't break any of our tests doing this, our tests are still covering this code.
Right.
So I'm still confident it works.
Yep.
Now the default parameter here for HandOfDice, so we're not quite done here. We need to have HandOfDice line 26 call line 29.
Right. That was the other part.
But I was wondering if you wanted to test drive this. I probably wouldn't, because I think of exceptions as being erasable. But you had told me that you like to test these sorts of invariants and preconditions.
Yeah, if we're going to introduce an exception here, to me that is a behavioral change, and so I would test drive that.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and add that test.
So let's go. I'm fine with renaming this test to just be HandOfDice test.
Is that the only HandOfDice test there is?
It's the only one that I could find. Take a look. Yeah, it's the only one.
Yeah. So I think what we want to say here is that converting from list, I think we're going to have a whole bunch of edge cases because we're going to move over those tests, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so,
Oops, code together
really,
just crashed on me. Of course. So I'm not seeing what you're typing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not charming. Well, I was just adding a section called edge cases.
Sorry, let me just clear this. Let's see. Do you have the renamed version of the file open?
I'm following you now.
Okay. So you see HandOfDice test?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me try to. Oh no, I don't.
I wonder if it didn't handle the rename properly.
Oh no, there it is.
Okay.
You seeing what I'm typing?
Yes, now I see you. Yep.
Okay.
I suspected the rename code together didn't quite catch the trigger for that, and you were editing a file that didn't exist anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Okay. So really what we're going to want to do here, I'm going to take a little bit of a big step just to sort of lay down a path. What we're going to do here is we're going to do this one. Actually, we're going to do that one. We're going to do, can't do that one because we only have integers. We're going to do that one. We're going to do that one. And then the one I'm adding is, we'll figure out a better name for this, but throws, what do we want to say? Out of bounds exception? No. Basically, it's incorrect data exception, right?
I don't know what case you have in mind, so I can't help you with the name.
Yeah. Throws runtime exception by default. And we'll fix up these names.
Okay.
But what we want to say is HandOfDice. Let's see. How do we assert on an exception again?
You can say assert that thrown by.
Yeah. Assert that thrown by. HandOfDice. HandOfDice dot from list of one is instance of runtime exception dot class and as message. Well, we'll do that something. Okay, now you can make that actually work.
Okay.
But that's what I'm thinking.
Yep.
And it won't be runtime exception, it'll be something else.
That
was what I was saying when I was saying out of bounds exception. Like, what do we want our default exception to be?
Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to start at the top, or do you want to start with this one?
I think start with this one because this is what we need to implement.
Okay. Oops.
I probably wouldn't make a custom exception here. I would just choose one of the existing runtime exceptions that seems appropriate for our situation. Maybe even not implemented exception.
I think illegal argument, like we just suggested.
Perfect. Yeah, let's do that.
And I'm going to take this a slightly smaller step. Okay. So I'm going to edit this. All right, and so now we can say
From die roles and then pass
right.
in throw new illegal argument exception. Do we need curly braces?
Well, what I want to do is this. But maybe I don't need to do that. So does it get? So we do a throw.
Is it requiring curly braces because it doesn't return a value?
Yes. All right. So now that should pass. Right. Whoops.
Sure didn't. What just happened there?
We broke a whole bunch of.
We've got some code that is creating invalid hands of dice.
Well, yeah. So I noticed that before, and then I forgot about it. There is this idea of a non-existent dice roll, and so hand of dice can represent that.
Mm-hmm. Probably should be using the null object pattern, but yeah.
Yeah, it was defined at this level to basically indicate unassigned, and I just never had a need to refactor it. But this would probably push it in that way.
Well, I don't want to change that now.
Right.
So let's just modify die rolls dot size on line 30 to be not equal 5 or not equal 0.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to do. Something like that. It's a little more revealing that if it's not empty, then it must be 5. But yeah, that's something I'll definitely have to refactor. Okay. So that test passes.
Okay. So I kind of want to factor out the line 30 through 37 to be a private validate hand of dice method.
Yeah, so generally I would refactor these out separately.
Sure.
So I basically do require empty or
Could do the empty checks as a guard clause. No, because no, we can't do it as a guard clause.
Yeah, can't do. I mean, we could do an early return, but I don't like that.
Yeah, it would work as a guard clause if we made a single validate method. But yeah, carry on. We'll just give it a complicated name.
Yeah, and it's one thing I like about this is it's actually, at least to me, a message like we've got some design conceptual issues that need to be fixed.
Although you could just say require correct number of dice.
That works too.
And it just so happens that 0 is also a correct number.
Yes. Whoops. What happened?
That should have worked. Try it again. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that's weird. It's still returning a Boolean.
Yeah, I am confused why it's thinking that this is just wrong. Because it's making it static. And,
it has to be static. It's coming from static.
Oh, right. So because it's static, though... because it's not a... It's either going to return or continue, and it doesn't know that this is throwing an exception. Oh, and that's why this didn't work the way I thought it would. Because I'm used to being explicit about throwing an exception in a validation, and I didn't notice that we're actually doing something very different.
So yeah, we do need to make it a Boolean, and we need to have two branches: one that returns the HandOfDice, one that returns invalid result.get.
So I'm fine with.
No, I got you. Let's try this. What if we said, is correct number of dice and has valid die rolls. And then up here we can say if is correct number of dice
right,
and has valid die rolls.
Right.
Then blah, blah, blah. I'll let you take it from there.
Yep. So let's grab that. That was the correct number. Hey, look, the code got moved. Magic. Who needs IntelliJ when you got somebody else doing it? So let's see. Does that still pass our tests? Nope.
What did we do wrong? If is correct number of dice.
Oh, this got flipped. So I was thinking in my head, Booleans are always trouble for me. Like, and that's why for stuff that some people would say, why are you writing a test for that? That's obvious. It's like, my brain, for some reason, Booleans, no.
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely found that if it's possible for me to make a mistake, I will make that mistake. I tell people over and over, you've probably said the same thing, that TTT doesn't stop me from making mistakes. It just catches them so much faster.
Yeah.
I still make all kinds of mistakes, but these days that I just spew whatever code and I'm running my test like every 50 keystrokes practically.
Yep.
And so it doesn't matter what I'm spewing because I just am like constantly, oop, wrong, okay, fix, okay, wrong, okay, fix, okay, wrong, okay, fix. It's a very fluid way to work.
Yeah. And one of the things I say about that is process is it requires less thinking about sort of the tedious stuff. Because I don't have to think, is this the right direction for the comparison operator? Do I have a bang here or not? Is this and or? I just
do it.
I just, like you said, spew it. Like, there's an intuitive sense of what's right, and it's not always right. And then the test that'll run will tell me in about, half a second. So yeah. I don't need to spend my effort on that.
The fact that we don't have an else statement here, and it's not the end of the world, but it kind of feels wrong to me. Because I don't think of that as a guard clause on line 32.
Yes, well, this is now no longer a guard clause.
Right.
Yeah. So we could, just to see what it looks like, is invert it. I don't like that.
No, I don't either. I would just put an else.
And so we can just
around line 36.
Could do a ternary operator. No, I'm kidding.
I use a lot of ternary operators in JavaScript, and that's because by default variables are constant. And it leads to this very nice sort of functional style. But when you have that, then you need a lot of ternaries because you can't do if statements that assign values. Right. If it had an if statement as a expression rather than a statement, then it would be cool. But it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I know that looks good to me.
Yeah.
So now let's just flesh out our tests, which is.
Did we want to work on the message?
Yes, Luigi, I would even add to that saying that mistakes become part of the process. Yeah. Like mistakes have this sort of connotation of you've done something wrong. But when you've got really good test coverage and you're running your tests every, half a minute or so, it's not so much you're making mistakes, it's just you're validating, change, validate, change, validate, change, validate. And yeah, you definitely do things that are wrong more often or incorrect more often, but the outcome is more correct. So basically, I'm agreeing with you. I just nitpicking the word mistake, I think.
Yeah, I think about it as a misstep. Like, oops, I tripped. Natural part of doing stuff. Do we know what message we want here?
I don't. I mean, I would like to pass in show the die rolls, but I don't really want to convert them to a string. Why
not?
Yeah, let's convert it to a string. So let's say invalid hand of dice. And then this. Yeah.
Whatever it's going to produce when I convert to a string, we'll figure that out.
Oh, is it smart enough to make a proper string out of it?
We have to, in this, for lists, I think it will do the right thing.
Okay.
So
that's all I meant by I didn't want to convert to a string. I just didn't want to go to the trouble of writing the code. But
so it'll probably be different, but it should be close enough. Yeah, that's what I kind of thought it would be.
Good.
Arg.
I am going to change that slightly. Just make sure we know what's going on. Okay.
All right.
Good.
All right. So then let's go back here. This is going to be pretty much the same as this one. Just the output's going to be different.
No, we don't need to check the message.
Sure.
We really only need to check it once.
So that should just work. Yep.
What do you think of this message here from throws exception one?
Oops, sorry.
Are you okay with this phrasing? Putting from in front?
Yeah. Yep.
Change the other ones.
All right. And then so assert that in this case, HandOfDice from empty list. Does not throw any exception.
I was just jumping ahead a
Yep.
little bit.
Yep.
Were you trying to run the test?
I was trying to run the test, yeah.
Go ahead.
All right.
Eh. What did I do wrong here?
One missing paren.
Okay.
All right. That works. And then,
You know what we should do is not do whether they throw an exception or not, but we should check to see that they actually got the correct hand of dice back. So it's not allows, but it converts empty hand and it converts full hand. Do we have a dot equals on hand of dice?
we do.
Okay. So we should be able to just say assert that hand of dice from empty list is equal. How does that work?
You're missing a paren again. Is equal to
new hand of dice something.
Yeah, so we could well, in this case it wouldn't be of, it would be new we don't have another way of creating one.
This line 10 in hand of dice should be public in that case, but it'd be hand of dice dot non-existent dice roll.
Yeah. Well, it certainly can be package access. It's fine. Although technically that's what unassigned is for, actually. That's why I didn't make it public.
Where's unassigned?
It's a method call, so we can do is equal to hand of dice.
Hand of dice dot unassigned. That's what I meant.
Yeah. Thought I had that. Okay.
Yeah, and squeegee is on top of it again.
All right, so that's good.
Okay.
So
you can do the same thing.
And same thing here. So assert that. We expect this to be...
We expect that to be
we could create it the other way using the of.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right.
Okay. So now we should be able to just take this 65676. That should work. And 12101.
Yep.
And then what we already throwing runtime exceptions by default. And then here we can say from allows invalid value to be returned. We could say HandOfDice dot from list of 1, 2, comma HandOfDice dot unassigned equal is equal to
is equal to. You're missing out the close paren.
I'll get it. Is equal.
Oh no, I was wrong. There, you weren't missing out one. It's getting confused by the code below it.
Yeah, that's what it is. Is equal. My IDE is not helping me out. You do it.
Because you didn't say assert that.
Oh, that would do it.
So we can say assert that. Assert that. Oops. Now you're missing a paren. And is equal to.
Hey, thanks, brother. Okay, is equal to HandOfDice.
Have a good one.
Dot unassigned.
Ah, okay. Awesome.
And it allows invalid value or allows, I don't love this test name.
Yeah.
Allows return value to be specified, default return.
Yeah. As allows default value to be specified.
Default value to be specified for use with invalid hands.
Mm-hmm. We can convert that with the lambda reference.
Okay. And now that we've, if you're okay with me continuing on,
yeah.
Now that we've retargeted that, we don't need most of these. Score carry doesn't exist. Current hand has wrong number of dice. We don't need. Current hand has non-integer dice. We need. But it throws exception when current hand or when HandOfDice is invalid. And really, any value will work there. Because I still want to specify that our code is passing the correct exception through, but we don't need to handle all the different cases.
Yep.
And in as persistable hand, from persistable hand, we have list of integers. We do that. I think we're good. I think we can check that in.
Just looking through. Yes, fewer tests in our IO tests.
Yeah. That to me is a real good sign that this was the right refactoring to make.
Yep.
I think it might have been Squeegee who mentioned last time that doing all, or maybe it was you, Ted, but having all these tests, which were basically poking the database just so we could do the right logic, that's a real error, a real red flag.
Yeah,
and I've definitely found that happens most often when you're missing a value type. Like, value types are something I still to this day don't see people using. Like, there's a lot of primitives in people's code. They don't make value types, but having good value types, it is miraculous for how it will improve your design.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have a whole talk on primitive obsession, and like I have a big slide that says just make more types. Like, what are you afraid of? And I sort of shoot down people's objections of like, oh well, what if that's slower? It's saying it's not. But well, now I'll have more types. Like, yes, but they will be meaningful. Right? They're not just arbitrary names like foo. They're actually meaningful in the domain, and you're probably missing a bunch.
That is actually my one gripe. Well, I probably have more than one gripe. That's my biggest gripe with TypeScript is that I don't remember what the technical term is.
Oh, but nominal types?
What'd you say?
Nominal?
Yeah. If you say type dollars is a big int or whatever, that's not a great example. But if you do that, it will happily let you use any int in that place.
Right. Yeah, that's the downside.
You really want to be able to say, no, this has to be this specific name type, nothing else. Yeah,
I use that a lot. So in Java, you can have IDs, a thing that underneath is a long, and you've got a customer ID, a cart ID, a product ID. They're all longs, but Java can tell the difference because it cares about that difference.
It does require you to create some of these useless feeling classes that are nothing but a wrapper for an underlying primitive, unless there's some new capability in Java I'm not aware of. But
so one thing I've found is that creating the types, even to wrap, to wrap along, I mean, it's not a big deal. And what's nice about it is if you realize, oh, we were exposing a key from our database, we actually should be, storing a UUID or some other representation. It's encapsulated, and so you can change it. And and records makes it basically trivial. It's one line of code.
Encapsulation is another design superpower. It's
at every level. Yeah.
It's such a sort of fundamental design concept that, again, I don't see people using. But yeah, you want to. Designs are hard to. Code is hard to work with when it no longer fits in your brain's short-term memory.
Yep.
And the way you make things fit in your brain's short-term memory is through batching. Your brain can handle, 7 plus or minus 2 things.
It's actually much less than that.
It's 5 plus whatever it is.
It's actually 3 to 4.
Is it 3 to 4?
Is the research? Yeah. I've studied that. But and it's so little, and that's assuming you're not thinking about anything else.
Yeah, but you can handle things, and those things can be numbers or they can be giant concepts.
Yeah.
And so design is all about batching your little things into big things that you can treat as one concept in your brain.
Yep. I call that basically give names to things, because you can remember the names, especially if it's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to commit. And what do I want to say? We moved HandOfDice validation from game database to HandOfDice. Yeah, so the testing we had before, I call that testing at a distance, and I always use the analogy of, like, if you had a light switch, it's easy to test it if you can directly touch the light switch, but if you have to touch it with a 10-foot pole, that makes it harder. You can do it, but it's harder, and so you want to test things if you're testing at a distance, like do you really need to be doing that?
Well, and good example of that is like many houses. My house has a breaker box that was labeled by, as far as I can tell, dyslexic pair of monkeys. And so I have no idea which breaker goes which with which thing. So there's some breakers I can flip the switch and I see the lights go out.
Right.
Some of them I flip the switch and I yell to my wife, "Hey, what turned off?"
Yeah.
And she's like, and she runs around and then tells me. And some of them I flip the switch and nothing seems to happen until I go and plug in a lamp into every single frickin' outlet in the house.
Yeah.
And the further, somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, where was it? I remember addressing it briefly, but it was X-proof. No, it wasn't X-proof. Anyway, somebody said, what about using BDD and Cucumber to test through features? Well, that's testing at a distance.
Yeah.
That's why I don't want to do that, because you have to do all this stuff to get to the thing you really care about.
Right.
And I think it was Jay Fields who invented the term narrow test versus broad tests for this phenomenon. You want your test to be right there on top of the thing that you're testing versus going through a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, and I keep reading people who are like, no, you want to do more system tests. Like, yes, you can technically cover more code, but when something goes wrong, how long does it take you to figure out what went wrong? And are you confident that you've actually covered and are asserting against all the paths? Because you are likely not.
I think it comes back to this sort of fundamental error that is endemic in the industry, which is that code coverage matters.
Yeah.
That, there's a lot of, frankly, people who, I'm going to be generous, people who possibly should know better, but definitely don't, who think establishing code coverage metrics is a good idea.
Yep.
And it is incredibly damaging. I know we've talked about this before. Yeah. It is incredibly damaging. Yeah. And it gets established by managers who don't know what they're doing in terms of, I won't even go there, who should do something better than that, but don't. And then people see that and they think that's correct. And it gets carried throughout the industry by programmers too, saying, oh, well, we want more code coverage. No, you don't want more code coverage.
Right.
You want correct code.
Yep.
And those things are only tangentially related.
Yeah.
And in fact, an emphasis on code coverage will tend to reduce the quality of your code because you will do less things to increase the quality of your code and more things to bump the number.
Right.
Juicing the number does not increase the quality of your code in the same way that doing good narrow tests does.
Yep.
But if you're trying to juice the number, then doing a fairly small amount of system tests that give you a really good line coverage metric, which is meaningless.
Yep.
Well, not entirely, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Sorry. I hate people chasing bad metrics because it leads to this really dysfunctional behavior, and then people are proud of it. And this combination of dysfunctional behavior plus I'm really proud of my dysfunction, it like makes my head explode.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so Pellet asks, is there a metric? And I don't know if you have one. I don't have one other than tracking bugs.
So I've got
escape bugs, but you probably have stuff.
Yeah, so I do. There's a whole section in my book on management. So if you go to jamesshore.com/s/AOAD2 and you scroll down, you'll see the table of contents. And management is not part of the public release version of the book. But basically what it comes down to is there's theory X management and there's theory Y management. Theory X management is management that believes the correct way to manage is by creating incentives for people so that they will do the right thing. And it sort of comes from this historical baggage of thinking that workers are fundamentally lazy. But there are a lot of people who practice theory X management now who don't believe that. But it's still this fundamental idea that the way to create the correct behavior is to create incentives. And theory Y management says that workers are inherently want to do the right thing. And the correct thing to do is to give them the context and information so they can do the right thing.
Right.
It turns out that metrics are a theory X approach to management.
Yep.
And when you create metrics, because of human nature, the vast majority, it's extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. That's exactly right, Squeegee. The vast majority of people are going to try to juice the metric because even if you tell them you will not be evaluated or judged based on this metric, they will say, yeah, right. You're full of shit.
Right.
I know this is going to come back and bite me at
perfect review.
At performance review. Or even if they don't, there's just this natural tendency to make numbers go up. We all want to see the numbers go up. And there's good like economic theory, management theory underlying this. But to make a long story short, you only have so much time in the day. And the time you spend making numbers go up means there's time you don't spend on other things.
Mm-hmm.
And software development, like many things, is what's called incompletely measurable.
Yep.
Which means that there are some things that are really, really important that you simply cannot measure. And thus, chasing metrics, theory X management, will lead to dysfunction. It will lead you to neglect the things that are important but can't be measured, and in favor of the things that aren't important but can be measured.
Yep.
So long story short, the question isn't how do we make tests? We do not use metrics to make test quality visible so team members and management keep track of. What we want to do is improve code quality, improve code outcomes. And the way we do that is through, yes, you can, as a team, say, well, let's investigate this thing. You can use what's called diagnostic metrics. I want to run code coverage and see what happens. But you run it once and you throw it away. Mm-hmm. And then you use that to learn and you report the conclusions. For managers, what you need to do is provide coaching. If you can do it yourself, you do it yourself. If you have to hire somebody, like, say, Ted or me, you do that. You ask people to tell you what they're doing. You say, I see that we have a problem with code quality. What do you suggest that we do? Mm-hmm. Again, there's a whole bunch of stuff on this in the book.
Yeah.
But metrics is the lazy way. The correct way is much, much more hands-on. It's much more collaborative. It's qualitative rather than quantitative. Anyway,
yeah, and that's why I like to say buttons. It's like metrics are for managers who don't want to manage.
That's right.
Because management is work. It's like it's
not sitting back telling people what to do and playing political games.
Yeah.
Playing political games is a very important part of management. I mean, hopefully not games, but it's dealing with the organization is very important, but that is not all there is. There's also conveying context, helping people feel motivated, helping people understand what their blind spots are. Going to the team and say, do you also feel like we have a code quality problem? Because I'm seeing all these bugs get in production.
Exactly.
Now that's a conversation.
Right.
No, boss, actually, we didn't know there were bugs in production. Why not?
Right.
How are you making that context visible? Yeah, boss, we do know that bugs are a problem. And this is what we think we should do to fix it. Oh, well, rewriting all the software probably isn't our budget. Do you have another idea? There is a role of management. It's not just hand it off to the people and say, oh, I trust you to do great work. That's taking the hands off the wheel. Yeah. But it's also not taping the wheel down and say the wheel must be at 0 degrees at all times because you will run off the road if you do that.
Yeah.
But I love that because it's so sadly true.
Yeah.
Squeegee, to answer your question, you do also apply that to overall business goals. Basically, any knowledge work, you need theory Y management, not theory X management.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have it in front of me, but there's a book called Measuring and Managing Performance in Organizations that's sort of like the gold standard for understanding this. But it basically boils down to use theory Y management.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was ranting in your general direction, Ted. That wasn't directed at you personally.
Oh, of course not. No, I mean, I'm nodding my head because I'm in full agreement, and it's what gets me is I see so much wasted effort, and especially by people who are like, yes, I know this sucks, but it's a metrics and we got to do it, and I value my job, and
sometimes
that has the opposite effect of motivating, right? It's demotivating because you're being told to. I mean, this is why I left Apple. Is you're being told to do something stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're being told, no, we will not let you use this tool, even though it's better than this other thing. And good people who know what they're doing, don't like to be told to do stupid things, especially if it's laid on top of them. You must do, and there's no discussion about it, as opposed to becoming, okay, I don't agree with this, but we'll we've had a good discussion. I understand your point of view. It's like, if it's just a rule that's handed down and you must do this thing that makes no sense, that's demotivating.
And that's probably part of why research has shown that extrinsic motivators destroy intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
When you pay somebody or measure somebody to do something and reward them based on what they do, that has this tendency to destroy their desire to do the right thing on their own.
Yeah.
Or people like yourself or me, the reason I'm a consultant is that I've got opinions and I'm not willing to put up with crap. And that sort of makes me unemployable in a lot of ways. So, I'm not willing to do dumb things just to satisfy.
It's more easy for somebody else or arbitrary. Those are the things. Yeah. It's like, okay, you're just making it easy for yourself, as opposed to taking the extra time to understand what is the nature of the quality of the code that is not measurable with a number.
So often the metrics argument boils down to the keys under the stoplight, a streetlight joke. You've heard this joke. Let me repeat it for those of you who haven't heard it. The joke goes is this police officer is walking along and he sees a man stumbling around drunk, on his hands and knees underneath a streetlight. And he goes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm looking for my car keys." The police officer says, 1, you should not be driving. You can barely stand. And 2, where'd you last see your keys? And he says, "Oh, over there." And he points to this dark alley. And the police officer says, "Well, why are you looking here, not in the alley?" He says, "Well, the light's better here." Right? That's what metrics are, is people, people just flat out say this. Why are you using this metric? I know it's not great, but it's all we've got.
Yeah, that's not acceptable to me.
On that note, I know we're just a little over time. Do you have any final thoughts on the code we wrote today?
Nothing other than what I've already, what I think I already says, like the refactoring that we did was nice. The both of the, especially of the test code, I really like so much when I do a whole bunch of learning ensembles these days, and it's so easy to just write the tests, even if you're doing TDD, write the tests, write the code, refactor the production code, and then you're done. It's like, wait, the tests are code too. And I love that you explicitly wanted to take that time to view the thing. It's like, I know I don't do that enough, but I so appreciate being able to tidy up the test code as well, to really, because my goal is always, I want it to be it's usually the first thing I look at when I get into a code base is, show me your tests. What are we working on? What are we concerned about? Show me the tests. And I want to be able to read them and understand them. And therefore I want to be empathic for or empathetic, whatever how you say it, for those people who come after and say, now I can read it and understand it more easily than before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agreement to that. The only thing that I would add is that this is the first time I've used the abstraction we used for HandOfDice. Can you flip over to game database? And line 107. This is the first time I've used this abstraction. I think I saw it in Martin Fowler's new edition of refactoring. Been looking for the opportunity to use it, and I'm really happy with how it worked out.
Yes, and I've totally forgot about that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think it might be my preferred. I have to try it some more, but I like it a lot better. Like I don't use the optional way where it's like, or else throw, but this is much more explicit. And so I really like this.
Yeah. Where are we doing optional right now on the game? it's probably the right place to do it because we want to see if it's empty. Like game database, when we say load game, it returns optional. We could use that pattern there. But I think, I mean, when we get to actually using it, we might want to refactor, but I think that actually is the right decision there. But it's a neat one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've managed to waste 3 hours of everybody's time again. Do you ever watch Car Talk, Ted?
No.
It was on NPR. It's not watch, it's listen to. It was a radio show, and it was a lot of fun with these sort of Brooklyn.
I mean, I think I've listened to like a couple of episodes, but I wasn't like a dedicated fan, so I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Well, the two brothers who had this, I think it was a Boston accent, but they have this really, strong
Northeast accent.
They're very blue collar, crunchy sort of those sorts of folks, and they'd be like, "Well, you've managed to waste another hour again." So that's what we've done. Thank you everybody for watching, and really enjoyed it. Thank you, Ted, once again for hosting and doing all the hard work to get code together, sort of working, and figure out the database stuff and everything else.
Well, it's been great. So we'll keep doing it until something happens.
Until we can't.
All right, folks. Thanks a lot, and ask questions elsewhere when you think of it. If you're watching the videos, like not only do we love the chat here, which I think is enjoyable for both of us, but continuing the conversation I think is really great. So thanks, folks.
And Ted has a Discord, and I also have a Discord, and I think they're both can show up in the chat somehow.
Well, you know how to find us, folks. That's that one. I don't know what the command is for yours.
I think mine is there. There we go. So yeah, and I do love the conversation, so I encourage you to continue in the other forums.
All right. Have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.